Welcome to this module of Business Processes and Systems presented by Bentley University. In this hands-on exercise, we'll introduce you to the activity of modeling business processes. Our business case is a small three-person shop called Custom Plates that is wondering how they can process more orders without adding additional staff. We will use a tool called Process Model to perform this task and answer that question. Let's begin. First, let's review our business case. A new store called Custom Plates has just opened, and its primary business is to permanently mount photographs onto glass plates. While mounting the photograph onto the plate, you can get a message printed around the picture, or you can get the plate glazed to bring out a nice finish. The mounting of the picture takes 5 minutes on average. The printing takes on average about 10 minutes. And the glazing takes 28 minutes, which includes 5 minutes for someone to brush the plate glaze onto the plate and put it in the oven, 8 minutes for it to bake in the oven, and then 15 minutes for it to set on a drying rack after being taken out of the oven. Most customers who come into the store want to wait for their plates to be done. About 40% of all jobs are only for the mounting of the photograph. 10% are for mounting and printing. 30% are for mounting and glazing, and 20% ask for everything, which includes mounting, printing, and glazing. There are 3 employees who work in the store for 8 hours each day, and for this case, we'll assume they have no breaks. When a customer enters the store, Kate asks which service the customer would like. She writes the information on an order sheet and places the order sheet along with the photograph on the back counter. Kate takes about 3 minutes to complete the order-taking step. Tracy then mounts the photographs onto the plates. If glazing is required, Tracy brushes the glaze onto the plate and puts it in the oven. Jennifer is the printing expert. If printing is required, it is done after the photograph is mounted, but before the glaze is put on. There is only one oven, and it can only take 1 plate at a time. After a plate comes out of the oven, it goes on a drying rack which can hold 5 plates before it can be given to a customer. When a plate is done, Kate packs the plate into a box and processes the customer's payment. Packing the plate takes 3 minutes, and processing payment takes 2 minutes. Now let's go over to our process model tool. For this exercise, we'll be using Process Model, which you can get a download copy of at www.processmodel.com. When you open Process Model, this is what the desktop will look like. I've added some of the details on our case example down in the lower right-hand corner. On our left-hand side, we can see the different pointer options that are available to us. We'll be using the Selector tool, as well as the connector line tool. If you hover over any of the buttons, you can see descriptives. Top main menu will be using the simulation once the model is fully built to save and simulate our project. On the right hand side are some tools, general tools that we can use to build our model. So let's start. We'll start by adding the customer. So I click on the person tool and drag it onto my screen. I'm going to just start typing, and it will replace the person with customer. Now we remember that all of our orders require some basic level of service, which includes taking an order, mounting the photo, packing the plate, and then charging the customer. So let's just go ahead and create that basic service process. I'm going to click on the process option, and drag that over here onto the desktop. I'll then type in take the order. I'll go ahead and grab another box. This will become mounting the photo. A third box for packing the plate. And the final box for charging the customer. I'll use the connector line tool to connect the customer to taking the order, then to connect taking the order to mounting the photo, mounting the photo to packing the plate, and packing the plate to charging the customer. We can now see this is the basic workflow for a customer that orders just the basic service. They will come into the office, will take the order, mount the photo, pack the plate, and then charge the customer. Now we also know that 10% of all orders choose printing as well. Printing would occur after mounting the photo, so I'll just add it down here. And I can add a connector from mounting the photo to printing, and then for these 10%, that's all they're going to have, so it will go back into the packing the plate option. 30% of our orders choose the basic service plus glazing. Now glazing, as we talked, was a 3-step process, so I'll add those 3 steps down below. It's brushing on the glaze, followed by baking, followed by drying. So we can see I'm running into the issue that I'm running over my text box, so I'm going to just quickly pick those 3 items, which I did by changing my cursor to the selector tool, clicking and dragging to highlight those 3 things, and I'll just move them over a bit so they're not interfering with the text down below. So we know that 30% of the orders choose the basic service plus glazing. So the glazing process includes brushing the glaze to baking, and then baking to drying. And we know that they'll come from mounting the photo down to brushing, and then drying will go back up to packing in the plate. Now 20% of the orders choose basic service plus printing plus glazing. So we now know that they might actually go from printing down to glazing. Now in order to just clarify some things and keep it straight in my own mind, I'm going to add some basic text boxes in here that represent the percent of orders that are following each of these steps. So this is 100% for all of the orders that are taken will get mounted. And then we know 40% are following just the basic route. So we'll add in a 40% here. Now we know 10% go to just printing. So that would be represented here as 10%. %30 are for glazing only. And 20% are printing and glazing. So to this 10%, we've got to add another 20%, which will make it 30%. And we know that 20% of that 30% will be for both printing and for glazing. So now we know that down into the brushing the glaze to the baking, we've got 30% coming directly from mounting the photo and 20% coming from printing. So we can say that 50% of all orders are traveling through the brushing the glaze to the baking process, and 50% continue on to drying, and so 50% will travel from the drying racks up to packing the plate. Now we had 20% from the printing to brushing the glaze, which left the 10% that's still not accounted for here. And those were the 10% that actually just went ahead with printing and then straight to packing. So we can see 40% going to packing plus 10% plus 50%. That accounts for 100% of our orders going fully to charging the customer. So this is the basic model that follows the first part of our worksheet. Now next I'm going to add just some notes on the amount of time it takes to follow each step. So looking back to my original case, I could see that taking the order requires 3 minutes. Mounting the photo takes 5 minutes. Packing the plate takes 3 minutes. And charging the customer is a 2-minute step in the process. Printing will take 10 minutes. Brushing on the glaze takes 5 minutes. Baking will take 8 minutes. And drying takes 15 minutes. Now I can follow each of the paths and know that depending on the type of order, I can calculate the amount of time each would take in the process. Next, I want to go ahead and add our employees. You can see down here on the right, I've changed the text box to now read the information with regard to the employees. So we can see that Kate is responsible for taking the order, packing the order, and processing the payment. Tracy is responsible for mounting the photo and applying the glazing, and Jennifer is responsible for printing. Here I can select the worker resource. I'll put the resource onto my desktop and change the names accordingly. Using the same connector line tool, I can now assign resources to each of the steps of the process. So I can say, Kate is responsible for taking the order. She's also responsible for packing the plate and for charging the customer. Tracy is responsible for mounting the photo, and she's responsible for applying the glaze. And Jennifer is responsible for printing. As you can see, my desktop could be arranged a little bit better so it's a little easier to read. So I'll move Jennifer down to here and then just bring her over to there. So now we have each of the resources assigned to each of the employees assigned to the tasks on the process that they're responsible for. Now you'll notice we didn't assign anyone to baking or to drying. This is because no employee needs to stand there and wait for the 8 minutes or the 15 minutes while that process is taking place. So we wouldn't assign a resource to that step, or else the modeling tool would set aside the amount of time and say that that employee was not available to do anything else. While Tracy, who brushes the glaze on, pops it into the oven to bake, but then goes on to some of her other tasks. Within this exercise, we said step 1 was to draw a process model of the custom plates process outlined above. This model that we've now designed here satisfies that request. Step 2 would be list the activities in your process model and complete the grid that shows activity, processing time, percent of all entities, and name of resource. Now, each of our activities are represented here by one of these process boxes. So we can list our activities as take the order, mount the photo, packing the plate, charging the customer, printing, brushing on the glaze, baking, and drying. The processing time for each we've already noted below each of the items. The percent of all entities are represented where we put in the percentages on our arrows. So taking the order is 100% of the orders. Mounting the photo is also 100%. Packing the plate would be 100% because 40 plus 10 plus 50. And then charging the customer would be 100% as well. The printing would represent 30%. The brushing on the glaze would be the 20% plus the 30% that was coming from mounting the photo, so that would be 50%. And then baking and drying are each 50% as well. Name of the resources used are the ones that we just assigned to each of these tasks. So Kate was responsible for taking the order, packing the plate, and charging the customer. Tracy was responsible for mounting the photo and brushing on the glaze, and Jennifer was responsible for printing. The resource that I would note for the baking process would be the oven, and the resource for the drying process would be the drying rack. Next, we wanted you to answer some general questions about workflow and how long each process would take. So first we asked, on average, how long should a customer expect to be in the store if he or she wants the basic service without the glazing or the printing? And we can see that it would be the top row of boxes of taking the order, mounting the photo, packing the plate, and charging the customer, which if you add up those minutes there, it would equal 13 minutes. Question 3B was, on average, how long should a customer expect to be in the store if they want the basic service along with glazing but not printing? So we would follow taking the order, mounting the photo, brushing on the glaze, baking, drying, packing the plate, and then charging the customer. And that would equate to 41 minutes. Section C was, on average, how long should a customer expect to be in the store if they wanted the basic service with printing only, not glazing? So that would be taking the order, mounting the photo, printing, packing, and then charging the customer, which would be 23 minutes. D, we ask, on average, how long should a customer expect to be in the store if she wants a photo mounted on a plate with glazing and with printing? So this would be basically the entire process of taking the order, mounting the photo, printing, brushing on the glaze, baking, drying, packing, and charging. And that would take 51 minutes. Finally, we ask, what is the total daily capacity of custom plates? And we ask you to calculate the capacity of each resource first. So we would have to look at each resource and list them out. I've gone ahead here and just opened a scratch pad that we can use to make these notes. So I'm going to list the resources first. We have Kate, Tracy, Jennifer, the oven, and the drying rack. Now we know Kate is responsible for 3 processes, which is take the order, and that's 3 minutes, packing the plates, which is also 3 minutes, and charging the customer, 2 minutes. Now we also have to note that each of these steps only has a certain number of plates that are applicable. In Kate's instance, it's 100% of the processes, so we would multiply each of these by 100%, or 1.0. This will be important as we discuss the other processes, the other resources and their processes. So we can see, on average, for any given plate that comes into the store, Kate is responsible for 3 minutes plus 3 minutes plus 2 minutes, or 8 minutes total. Tracy, we identified, is responsible for mounting the photo, which is 5 minutes, and brushing on the glaze, which is also 5 minutes. However, mounting the photo is done for all plates, so that we'll continue to call that 100%. But brushing on the glaze is only for 30% plus 20%, or 50% of all plates that come into the shop. So we're going to multiply that 5 by 50%. This would give us 7.5 minutes. So on average, Tracy has to work for 7.5 minutes every time an order is placed within the shop. Now Jennifer is only responsible for printing. Printing takes 10 minutes, but only 30% of the plates get printing. So Tracy is only used on average for 3 minutes for any plate. The oven takes 8 minutes, and it's for 50% of the plates. So the oven will be used on average for 4 minutes for every single plate, for the average plate. And the drying rack takes 15 minutes. However, there are 5 slots in the drying rack, so we have to divide that by 5, and then multiply that by the 50%. So the drying rack is only used on average for 1.5 minutes per plate. So we can see here that the bottleneck for the average plate is Kate. Everyone else can get their work done within the time allotted that Kate would use for any given plate. Now if we calculate our average day, which we said our capacity is 8 hours times 60 minutes in an hour, divided by our bottleneck, which is Kate, of 8 minutes, would give us 60 plates. So the theoretical threshold for this business would be 60 plates. And this ends this workshop.